Most people don't know when they've disappeared. That's the trick. You don't vanish all at once. You erode quietly, gradually, and by the time someone notices, you're already gone. There's a lighthouse on a forgotten stretch of coast. No plaque, no name, just stone and wind and silence. Every night ships pass by. They trust the light to be there, to cut through the fog, to keep them from breaking. None of them wonder who keeps the flame burning. You were that lighthouse, the first one they called in a crisis, the one who never asked for anything but showed up anyway. You were the calm, the understanding, the safety, everyone's safe place, but you had nowhere to rest. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we create to survive in a world that rewards performance, and the longer we wear it, the more we forget we're even wearing one. You became what they needed. Not because they asked you to, but because that's what you learned love was, being necessary. The light shone, they praised the glow, but no one ever asked about the keeper. They called you strong, reliable, kind. They admired your shine, but no one came close enough to feel your flicker. And here's the part no one sees. You didn't want applause, you wanted to be seen. But instead, they saw the function, the outcome, the role. They leaned on you, not realizing they were leaning through you. And all the while you told yourself it was enough, until something inside whispered the question you never dared speak aloud. Why do I feel so invisible in the relationships I work so hard to hold together? You didn't want to feel resentment, but resentment is what grows in silence, in absence, in the space between what you give and what never comes back. And just like that lighthouse, still standing, still glowing, you wonder how long before your own foundation begins to crack, because even stone wears down under a tide that never retreats, and even light can burn out. You didn't break one day. You disappeared one piece at a time. You stopped asking for things, then stopped wanting them. You filtered your truths into something softer, something more acceptable. You told yourself it was maturity, compassion, strength, but deep down you know what it was, survival. If you needed less, no one could leave you for being too much. If you gave more, maybe, just maybe, they would stay. You became the echo of what everyone else needed. And here's the cruel irony. The more you vanished, the more they relied on you. They loved your light. They never looked for the source. Just like Echo in the myth, who loved so deeply she lost her own voice, cursed to repeat the words of others until all that remained was her sound in the mountains. Never her truth, never her name, only her echo. That was you, giving, reflecting, hoping someone would hear the echo and come looking, but no one did. You gave comfort, support, stability. You anticipated what they needed before they knew they needed it. And not once did they ask what it was costing you. They weren't unkind, but they were blind. And you were the one who made blindness easy, because every time you wanted to say, I'm tired, you said it's okay. Every time you wanted to say, I feel alone, you said, I understand. And now you're left with a truth that stings. You didn't teach them to mistreat you. You taught them that your silence meant strength, that your absence meant that balance, that your invisibility meant peace. But your soul knows the truth. Jung said, we suffer most from the parts of ourselves we have never lived. And the part of you that wanted to be loved without having to earn it, that part has been locked away, watching, waiting, wondering how much more of yourself you'll give before you admit you're starving in a house you helped build. And here's the moment people don't talk about. You start to resent them. Not because they're bad, but because you're tired of being good at disappearing. Tired of being celebrated for a light that's burning out your bones. Tired of being needed but never known. And just before you collapse, you hear the question again, clearer this time. What if your giving wasn't generosity, but fear in disguise? What if the love you offered was really a currency you used to buy closeness? What if every yes was a way of saying, please don't leave me, without having to say it out loud? And what if you've finally reached the moment where you stop apologizing for needing something back, for existing beyond the glow, for wanting to be something more than useful, because echoes fade, and lighthouses crumble. But the soul waits for no one. It speaks, whether we listen or not. And now yours is no longer whispering, it's roaring. They only noticed when you stopped shining, not when your voice went quiet, not when the sparkle in your eye began to dim, not when your chest tightened in the presence of more demands. They noticed when the light, the part of you that served them, flickered. And when it finally went out, they grew frustrated, not worried, not concerned, frustrated. There is a moment every lifelong giver reaches, a slow, breaking moment that arrives not in fire but in silence. You don't explode. You evaporate and no one hears it happens, but inside everything changes. A part of you, long repressed and patient, wakes up. Not the one who says yes, not the one who keeps peace at all costs, but the one who has watched quietly from the edges. The part of you that is tired of being a utility. This is where the resentment rises, not as rage, but as revelation. And for the first time, you begin to question the sacredness of your kindness. You wonder if it was kindness at all. You remember the nights you gave when you were already empty, the people who only showed up when they were drowning, the family who loved the role you played, but never checked if the actor was breaking, and the truth hits you harder than anger ever could. Maybe you didn't give because you were full of love. Maybe you gave because you were afraid that without your usefulness, you'd have no worth at all. Carl Jung warned us that the shadow is not evil. It is the part of ourselves we've cast away in favor of who we think we need to be. And when it returns, it doesn't scream. It whispers truths that are hard to hear. What if your giving was never free? What if it was a contract, silent, invisible, where you hoped your selflessness would be enough to finally be seen? And what if they never signed it? You feel it now. The grief beneath the generosity, the ache behind the approval, the bone-deep weariness of carrying relationships on a back that was never built to be a bridge. You remember the statue from the old story, the happy prince who gave away every gem in his body, every scrap of gold from his skin until there was nothing beautiful left. The townspeople, seeing only the worn-down husk, tore him down. He was no longer useful, no longer lovely, just a hollow figure of what he used to be. They never mourned him, they simply moved on, and you wonder how many people love you for what you offer, not who you are when the offering stops. This is the fracture, the rupture between your persona and your truth. The lighthouse has gone dark, and for the first time you're not racing to relight it. You're sitting in the dark, not as punishment, but as proof that you were never just a source of light. You are the keeper. And for once, the keeper is tired of burning for others while freezing inside. There's a room in the lighthouse that no one talks about. You never entered it, not fully, because it holds the truth. And truth for the giver is dangerous. It holds the nights you cried while others slept peacefully unaware. It holds the moments you screamed inside your chest while smiling with your face. It holds every time you were too tired to go on, and did anyway. And as you step inside, you feel it. This was the place you locked yourself away to keep the illusion alive. The illusion that you could hold it, or the illusion that love meant erasing yourself. The illusion that being quiet was the same as being kind. But now the lock has rusted, the door swings open, and what waits for you inside isn't weakness, it's truth. Carl Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is your darkness, not evil, not broken, but full of exiled pieces of you begging to be known. You begin to see clearly now, you weren't just tired. You were soul-weary. You weren't just generous. You were terrified to be seen without something to offer. You weren't just strong. You were trained to believe your softness was dangerous. And suddenly the questions return, not as doubts, but as compass points. What would happen if I asked for something instead of giving it? Who would stay if I stopped showing up first? Can I love people without becoming invisible to myself? You don't answer right away. You sit with the discomfort. You let the questions breathe. You remember the quote, She wore her kindness like an invisibility cloak. Only when she unclasped it did she see herself waiting there. You take it off, you feel naked, guilty, unsure, but underneath it all, you're still standing, still whole, still burning. You are not a role, you are not a mask, you are not a lighthouse built for others alone. You are the keeper, the architect, the soul, and from now on your flame will not be lit by obligation, it will be lit by truth. Not for approval, but for yourself. You expected collapse to feel like failure, like shame, like proof that something in you was broken. But it didn't. It felt like silence, not the silence of absence, but of presence. The kind of silence that only comes when the noise of everyone else's needs finally stops echoing through your body. This is where repair begins, not with more doing, not with promises to be better, not with apologies for stepping back. Repair begins in stillness, in listening, in asking yourself the question you never had the courage to ask. What if I'm allowed to need something back? The answer doesn't come in a grand revelation. It comes in small, almost imperceptible acts. You hesitate before saying yes. You stop cushioning your no in explanations. You start noticing how often your boundaries arrive dressed in guilt and begin changing their clothes. You don't stop caring, but you stop bleeding for it. Carl Jung said, "Our suffering comes from our unlived life." And you realize now you've been unliving, functioning, facilitating, surviving inside a role you perfected so well that no one ever thought to look behind it. But you've opened the door now, and what stands inside that tower isn't fragile, it's fierce. Not the kind of fierceness that bites, the kind that finally lovingly says no more. No more pouring from an empty vessel, no more contorting into shapes just to be received, no more offering parts of yourself as currency for love that was never guaranteed. You're beginning to understand something that terrifies and frees you. They may love your silence, they may love your consistency, they may love your strength, but you need to love your limits. You need to honor your exhaustion. You need to recognize that every soul, no matter how generous, deserves a home inside its own life. And that home, that life, it starts with a new kind of fire. Not the desperate light of a lighthouse screaming across the ocean, but the gentle burn of a hearth flame. You're not shining to guide ships anymore. You're shining to keep yourself warm. And for the first time, you're not afraid to be seen resting. Because what they once called selfish is what you now call sacred. You are not abandoning others. You are returning to yourself, not as a punishment, but as a promise. A promise that the next time you give, it won't be to prove your worth. It will be because you are full, because you are ready, because you choose to. And that difference, it changes everything. There's a moment, quiet and soft, when everything shifts. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause, it comes with breath, with the warmth of your own attention returning home to you. You step outside the tower, not to relight the beam, not to be needed, but to be, and the sea is calm, no fog, no storm, just space. You no longer look to the horizon, wondering who's watching. You no longer scan the waves, hoping someone will notice the cracks in your stone, because you notice them now. You see the places you eroded, the spots where you overextended, overpromised, overwrote yourself into other people's stories, and instead of shame, you feel grace. You're not who you were. And that's a blessing. You are not a lighthouse anymore. You are something more ancient, more alive. You are firelight in a temple, a sun rising without needing permission, the echo that returned to its own voice. And still one ship slows, not because it needs saving, but because it sees you. Not the light, you, not the persona, not the utility, not the echo, the person, whole lit, human. Clarissa Pinkola Estes said, "Eventually every woman who stays away from her soul home for too long tires. Then she seeks her skin again." You have found your skin again. The light that once burned you hollow now flickers with gentleness. You don't give like you used to, but you give deeper. You don't love to be needed. You love to be known. And if someone asks why you're not as available anymore, you smile, not with spite, but with truth. because being available to everyone once made you unavailable to yourself, and you're done with that. So if this story was yours, if you've lived as the lighthouse, the echo, the statue torn down when it was no longer golden, leave something below, not for the algorithm, not for me, but for the next person who is silently, invisibly burning out while the world claps for their light. Let them find your words. Let them know they're not alone. Let them know that one day they too can step into the daylight, not as a role, but as themselves, seen enough, and finally home.